Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. You're with Nicole and my twins, Ivy and Remy here. And today we're going to be talking about all things preemie babies, NICU, which is a neonatal critical care unit, and the special care nursery. So my babies were preemie babies. They were born early and we ended up spending a couple of weeks in special care and NICU combined. So I want to take you through all the things that I wish I knew and kind of so you can prepare yourself mentally. So we're going to be going through some of the challenges along the way and things you can expect. So chances are, if you're going to have twins or multiples, there is a high likelihood that you may have you may be in the special care nursery or NICU at some point. And even if you're just pregnant, you know, you may have a preemie baby yourself anyway. So this information will be relevant to you as well. My babies here are going to go for a little walk with my husband. This is the fourth time that we have tried to film this and it's proving to be very, very difficult. Yeah, there's just been a baby at all times needing attention or trying to go to sleep, needing a bottle. It's just been really full on. So if you can appreciate that, give us a like and subscribe. So say goodbye to Ivy and Remy. Bye. And let's get to it. Hey, don't pull her ear. So we were in NICU and the special care for a total of 2 weeks. During that time, there were so many things that happened, so many things that I just didn't even realize. So I wanted to definitely share this video with you in case you want to prepare mentally and just let you know some of the challenges and just things to expect along the way. So my twins were born at 35 weeks and 3 days. They were born really small. So Ivy was born at 1.7 kg and Remy was born at 2.1 kg. Thankfully, both babies were breathing really well and didn't need any breathing support. That was as soon as they were born. If your babies are born before the 36-week mark, their lungs wouldn't have fully developed yet. So there is a chance that you may need a round of steroid injections, which I had. I actually had that around the 30-week mark, and that was because I had an early water rupture. Thankfully, my babies didn't come at that time. I managed to keep them in for another 5 weeks, which I was so thankful for because that would have drastically changed my NICU and special care experience even more and made it really, really full on. It's always full on, but it would have made it very different experience. So if you did want to check out either or find out more information about my water rupture, which was called PREEMIE, or if you want to find out about the birth experience, I do have those videos up on my channel, so go check them out. But today's all about NICU and special care, and let's start with the NICU because that's what happened first. So literally as soon as the babies were born, I had a few moments where I was able to cuddle them, and then after they had the initial checks in the birthing room, they were taken to the NICU. The reason my babies were in the NICU was because there wasn't actually a twin room available in special care. So the special care nursery was completely full. I'm still thankful that we got to see what happened in the NICU because there was so much monitoring and checks that happened, and I really felt like that was the safest place for them at the time, especially because they were so small. It was kind of a really unusual feeling for me because I wasn't with the babies from the get-go. Once the babies were born and taken away, I had to go into a separate ward. So I was in the maternity ward and my babies were in the NICU. They're in 2 different locations in the actual hospital, which I probably wasn't expecting. I was probably expecting them more to be accessible just because it's a weird feeling to have newborn babies or a baby and not be with them straight away. So I actually wasn't with them for the first 2 nights, and that was because I had to stay in the maternity ward and recover from my cesarean. So when you're recovering, they check you every hour for the first 12 hours, and then after that it went to every 2 or 4 hours. I'm not entirely sure, I don't remember. It was all a bit of a blur. So I was able to get wheeled over and see the babies in the NICU, but I couldn't stay with them. Thankfully as well, my husband was able to stay with the babies, so that gave me some peace of mind. But yeah, it was still just quite an unusual feeling knowing that I wasn't with my family for the first little part. But when I did get to the NICU and see them and I was able to have a look around, the NICU is very clinical, it's very regulated and rightly so. There's you know, really sick babies in there and babies that need a lot of support and just really need as much help as possible. So what I mean by that, it was extremely clean. There was cleanliness standards and clothing standards that you had to meet. So for any visitors, you obviously had to wash down your arms, literally from the elbows down, hands. You had to wash your phone before you were able to take it in it. You weren't allowed to wear jewelry. You also weren't allowed to wear sleeves from the elbows down. And then from a security standpoint, it was super regulated as well. So you had to sign in, sign out. There were security doors. Yeah, you had to either let a nurse know who you were, make yourself known. You couldn't just come and go like a normal ward. It's good because you want your babies to be as safe as possible. You don't want anyone and everyone walking into those rooms because it is really important that the babies stay as safe as possible. So that's kind of like what the level is like in NICU. It's super regulated. Then once you get in there, the babies are being monitored like literally 24/7 around the clock. They're being monitored for things like breathing, things like temperature, heartbeats, jaundice, like anything and everything, you name it. As a mother, it was quite alarming and I guess not what you'd expect your usual experience to be like because you know, you always have in your mind when you have your babies, you're just going to be in the ward with them, they're going to be next to you and you get to go home a couple of days later. Not for preemie babies. Unfortunately, that's not the experience. When you get in there, the babies will probably be in an incubator or an isolate, they call it. And that they look really scary, but it's essentially just a big container where the babies are in and it monitors their temperature or it regulates the temperature so that the babies don't have to do it for themselves. So certain babies, once, you know, before they're a certain gestation and fresh out, they're not able to regulate themselves. So that's one of the reasons why they put them in those isolates. You can't easily access your baby either. They've got cords all over them. They've got socks on to regulate, to monitor their heartbeat. So it's not like you can just pick them up either. It's like you literally, it was an ordeal every time you wanted to try and hug your baby or cuddle your baby because they're so tiny. They're literally so small. I just remember like the preemie nappies that we had like came up to their armpits. They were literally that small. You can't easily access your babies either, which is a bit strange. So yeah, there's screens everywhere with all like the different things that are being monitored. There's a nurse around the clock. Usually there's a dedicated nurse to 1 or 2 babies that they're looking after. There were some very, very preemie babies. They're called micro preemies. So I met a couple of women whose babies arrived around the 27-week mark, which is so early. And one of them had been there in NICU and special care for over 100 days, which is just crazy. And it's like really heartbreaking because it definitely takes a toll on you mentally. So yeah, if you find yourself in that situation, my heart absolutely goes out to you. So NICU, very regulated, very clean, babies being monitored 24/7. If your babies are doing well, then they move to the special care unit. So I should say as well, back on NICU, they will also put in a tube feeder for your babies. If they're born before the 36-week mark, they don't have the sucking reflexes. So generally they would need to be tube fed for a little while until they learn to do that themselves. And that was the reason why we were in special care. We were in special care for feeding and for growing. Pretty much once a twin room became available, we're off and out. A few days later into special care. As my babies moved into special care, I was discharged from the maternity ward. So I was only in there for 2 nights with the cesarean and then they discharged me. I do not feel like that was enough time to recover. I feel like it was extremely rushed. I could hardly walk and I was in severe pain. But yeah, I had to start my recovery or continue my recovery, I guess I should say, in the special care. And that was really hard because when you and your babies are in special care, they're not looking after you. They're just looking after the baby. So you are no longer a patient of the hospital, just the babies are. And That was something as well that some hospitals do and some hospitals don't. So some hospitals allow you to stay overnight in special care with your babies and some do not. Thankfully, the hospital that I was at allowed you to stay in overnight with your babies, because the whole time they were there, so for the whole 2 weeks, my husband and I stayed with them every single day and night. It would be so difficult if you were made to leave. So that was one thing that definitely was a big mental challenge for me as well. So being in the hospital 24/7 with your babies who need help, like it's just so mentally draining. Like I can't even tell you how draining it is. The thing that drained me the most, I think, was that there was a different nurse every 4 to 8 hours depending on when their shift changed. So look, if you're an introvert like me, it's a lot, because every nurse has their own idea or opinion about what you should and shouldn't do and how you should care for your babies. Obviously, a lot of that advice is very important and completely warranted, but after a while, it's like sometimes you get conflicting advice or conflicting ideas, and it's a lot to take in, especially when you are removed from your own environment, you're removed from your home. You don't feel like you have a lot of control because you can't see or you can't easily get to your baby. All these different things pile up. You're also not getting natural sunlight. You're recovering from the birth. So either from an operation or, having a natural birth, which is full on in itself. That was part of the problem. You are recovering in hospital or special care, but you're not an actual patient. And that was probably one of the biggest challenges for me. So when you get to special care, you may be in special care for a variety of different reasons. A lot of the reasons are for feeding and for growing. Some babies still need breathing support. Some babies still have jaundice. All of those things would be addressed in special care. Your baby may also have a certain condition which they find. They also do like a number of checks when you're in special care before you're discharged. So they check, they do all these like checks of their hips, and they need to be breathing completely by themselves. They also need to be taken out of the isolate, so they have to do that like a weaning process. So they start dropping the temperature of those incubators and let the baby start regulating themselves before taking them out of it completely. And your baby needs to be growing consistently, so not declining. You need to have growth consistently and feeding by themselves for a minimum of 48 hours. So that was really difficult because our babies were being tube fed for a while, at least a week, because they were born preemie, and then they started the bottle feeds. But they need to work up to being bottle fed or breastfed like literally every feed. So it's a process. And that's the thing. When you're in special care, they don't really give you an end date. They say the goal is like aim for your due date, and your due date being full term of 39 weeks. That could be like a month or a couple of months that you're actually in special care. And that was something that definitely affected me mentally, because I was like, that's a long time away. And we were actually discharged quite early. We were discharged after 2 weeks, not 4 weeks, because the babies were feeding and growing so well. But yeah, there's not a lot of light at the end of the tunnel sometimes, and they don't like to give you, I guess you could say, hope, because they don't want to put a time frame in your mind and then the baby not meet that, and then you're not allowed to leave. And I know it sounds bad, but it does. You want to have something to look forward to. You want to go home. You want to get settled, all these different things. But I guess at the time, you just have to try and take it for what it is. Remind yourself that it's just it's just a moment in time, and it will pass. So some of the things that were quite alarming or uncomfortable for me when I was in special care, obviously seeing, the tubes going through your baby's nose and into the esophagus for the tube feeding. That's alarming. The cannula in their arms, because they're so tiny, like the cannulas were quite large. For Remy, his wasn't done properly the first time, so they had to do it again. And his arm was all swollen and bruised, which, is quite upsetting. And just seeing them, uncomfortable and in pain when they have to either change the tube or reinsert the cannula is not a nice feeling, like it hurts an adult. So I couldn't even imagine how painful that would be for a baby. They're also doing like little pin pricks every morning of their ankle, little drop of blood. So I just remember their little foot had all these little pin marks on it, and I think that looked quite painful for them. But I mean, obviously they have to do all these things. It's just things that I'm telling you that you may have to start preparing for mentally. Something else that I found really difficult while I was in special care was that it's all shared facilities. So for the 2 weeks I was there, I had to share a bathroom with all of the other parents that were staying there or visitors. Toilets, showers. It was kind of like shared housing. So same with like a common area for kitchen. In Australia, we have something called Ronald McDonald House. So they were the ones that funded this. It was all volunteer led. So there were volunteers there that like clean the kitchen and, all of the facilities and that kind of thing. And I'm so thankful for obviously being able to be in a situation where we had that available, because some hospitals don't have it. But yeah, it was still really difficult because you don't have any of your own space. You also have to sleep in the baby's room, and it's not a bed, it's like a day bed. So it was very painful sleeping on the day bed recovering from a cesarean, because your body literally has, especially your torso, has like no structure to it, and it's just like you have no muscular strength. So you literally just feel like a pancake lying down. They also just had like a chair there, and they would let my husband sleep either on the chair or on the day bed. So they weren't happy for him to stay on the floor or anything like that, even if we brought our own mattress, which he sometimes did, and we just kind of hid ourselves. We kind of like hid him because some of the nurses weren't keen on him staying, even though we just wanted to be with our babies all the time. So because we really wanted to, or me in particular, I really wanted to leave the hospital, obviously with the babies being ready to, but I was very keen to get home. They offered us this program where you could tube feed your babies at home if you wanted to, and then you were able to, I guess, leave early. But my husband and I were like, no, if our babies need to be tube fed, then they need to be in hospital. Like, we're not leaving and going home and then trying to tube feed twins. Like, this just sounds like way too full on. Twins are going to be obviously extremely full on as it is without all this tube feeding business. So we didn't want to do that. I just kind of knew that the fastest way to get the babies out would be to bottle feed them. And that's because either myself, my husband, a nurse, anyone could do it while they're in special care. And breastfeeding takes quite a while to get the babies used to. Bottle feeding was the best thing that I did, even though I still expressed breast milk for them. So they were still getting breast milk. I just wanted them to be bottle fed because they had to do it for 48 hours before we're allowed to leave. So getting them used to bottle feeding and building their strength up with that was the reason that we were able to go home. If we had have done the breastfeeding route, I think we would have been in there for a lot longer, just because A, you don't know how much the babies are having, and B, I was only me that would have been able to do it, so I wouldn't have been able to do it as consistently. So yeah, we just wanted to make sure that we could get them home as soon as possible. And then they learned to breastfeed when we got home, but I just knew that the faster we can get out, the better. So in special care, some of the nurses allow you to do the chest to chest, where you get your baby out. They still have their little cords, like all of their little cords and monitors on, and you get to like spend some time cuddling them. That was really amazing, and some really precious moments that you'll remember forever, because they're so small and just so tiny, and they're just perfect, and you just want to be with them at all times. So yeah, that was definitely something that was super lovely, and I got to look forward to every day. While we're in special care, the babies are on a really strict feeding program or schedule, I guess you could call it. So they literally need to be fed every 3 hours on the dot, which sounds like a lot, but because they're so small, they really do need those extra feeds. So yeah, getting them to do that was quite difficult. And I guess for the first week, because they didn't have the sucking reflexes, they were being tube fed, so it was easier. And then once they started to become bottle fed, it was, I guess, a bit more tough, because they needed to be finishing their bottles, and sometimes, you know, one of your babies would not drink as much milk, and then they wouldn't count it as like a full bottle feed, which was a bit disheartening because you're like, no, I just want them to like finish their bottle, which was really hard because you just have to like lower your expectation of what you want for yourself. And then just know that, what you're giving your babies at the time is the best possible thing. Some of the nurses are amazing in special care. Some of them were also a lot more difficult. It just depends on, who it is, their experience, all that kind of thing. While you're in special care, you will come across a variety of different personalities of the nurses and the doctors and all that kind of thing. I definitely noticed that my mood was affected instantly if there was a nurse on shift that I didn't gel with very well. And that didn't happen too often, but when it did, it just made me feel a bit more uncomfortable. I also felt like because I was my husband and I were some of the only people that stayed in the special care unit 24/7 with their babies, we got to see a lot of what happens at all times of the day and night. And I guess because we saw that, I didn't really feel comfortable like leaving the babies or going home for a night. I know that sounds like a little bit OTT, but honestly, like I just didn't want to leave my babies crying. Some nights there would be times where the nurses have too many babies to look after at once, and then your babies are left crying, and you would step in to help. And obviously, like, you're there, you want to help your babies, but I just felt like if I weren't there, like, how long would they have been left crying for? And that's just something that I couldn't bring myself to do. So I couldn't leave them. I didn't want them to be left unattended if they needed something. And I found myself helping out a lot of times throughout the night, just looking after the babies because the nurses couldn't get to them when they intended to, because they either had too many babies to look after, or one night the bubs were crying and they needed me, and I was ringing the bell for the nurse to come and assist, and she didn't come for quite a while, and then she came back a while later. There was another nurse that came to help me in her absence, and then one of the nurses came in that was meant to be looking after the bubs and was like on night shift and said that she was having a nap, and I was just like, what? Like, aren't you meant to be like on shift looking after my babies? So there was just some things like that made me feel uncomfortable. Obviously, not every nurse is like that. 90% of the people there were absolutely incredible, and I'm so thankful for them. But there's just that 10% that make you go, okay, I'm not going to leave my babies here. Prior to departing special care, there were all these checks that need to happen. So they check them for like ears, eyes, hips, like heart, you name it, and just make sure that they're really ready to go. They also made us do all of these readings and programs just to kind of prepare yourself to go home. In hindsight, I am happy that we got to spend time in special care, because there were so many things that I learned about the babies that, being a first-time mom, I wouldn't have realized or I wouldn't have known about before they got home. At the time, even though I was uncomfortable and just wanted to get home as soon as possible, I am thankful for the time that we spent there. You also will get to meet a lot of other families in the same situation. I didn't get to meet any other twin parents or multiple parents, but I got to meet a lot of people that had singletons. Their babies were going through the same things that ours were. So it was really nice to know that you're not alone and give support, and, in those common areas, be around each other, talk to each other about what's happening. And in that sense, it was really amazing, and you make some friends along the way. In the end, we had a really abrupt exit. So they kind of told us, like, on the day, you're leaving at 5 o'clock today, which was like, what? We had kind of like 4 weeks in mind, and it's only been 2 weeks. Obviously, we were super thankful, but it was a really, really like rushed exit. Kind of like frantically got all of our stuff together and made our way home with the babies. But once we got home, it was absolutely incredible. So that was our experience of special care. It was very full on time, but I am thankful that we did have that time there just so the babies could feed and grow in the safest way possible. So if you do have any questions, please let me know in the comments below and I will get back to you. And if you do like this video, please give me a like and subscribe and hit the bell, because I have a new video coming out every week. Thanks guys, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.